everyone. This is Andrew Perry, CCI, from Dickinson Center, New York. And the purpose of this video is to guide you through a seminar on leadership and motivation. This is a part of the online video series for the Certified Clogging Instructor program. If you have any questions for me at any point, you can give me a call at 518-529-6157, or you can email me at andrew@drewcrewcloggers.com. That is ANDREW at DREWCREWCLOGGERS.com. So I have my iPad pointed at my laptop here. This is a PowerPoint presentation that I typically give in the face-to-face seminar. And so hopefully you can learn a few things from this presentation. I will be incorporating material that you have seen in your CCI manual, as well as additional academic material related to human motivation. This is from the field of psychology, educational psychology, which is my other area. This is the area that I'm getting my PhD in at The Ohio State University. So I thought I would incorporate both what you have in your manual as well as my own expertise on leadership and motivation in clogging groups and clogging teams. So first of all, group leadership is a tremendous responsibility that can either enhance or hinder the team's success. So as the leader, you have the job of keeping the group on task, keeping the group motivated, keeping the group together and cohesive. It's a lot of responsibility, and as the leader, that's your job. So this is a very important topic to master. The seminar's objectives, there are 6 objectives: develop an effective motivational plan, list several motivational tools, define what morale is and the variables that affect it, identify personality traits that are found in effective leaders, name actions used by successful leaders, and solve leadership problems. And these are the objectives outlined in your CCI manual. So first of all, developing a motivational plan, you should always expect the best from your dancers. You should have a positive and optimistic attitude. It really does rub off. Well, your attitude will rub off on your dancers. If you have high expectations of them and high standards of them, they will have high expectations and high standards from themselves. Now, that doesn't mean hold them to too high a standard. It doesn't mean be too hard on them or be rough with them, but it does mean that you believe that they can succeed. You believe that they can do it. And if that is a genuine and sincere thought, and it is demonstrated in your behavior, it will show, and it will rub off on your students. Related to this, and this is our first foray into academic material that's not in your CCI manual, is expectancy value theory. This is by Eccles and Wigfield, and it essentially argues that people have motivation for tasks based on 2 elements: how well they think they're going to do, their expectancy for success, times their value for the task. So how much do they value it? How much do they think it's going to be important to their future lives? How hard is it? What's the cost to them? That all factors into value. And it's a multiplicative model, as you see there. Expectancy times value equals motivation. So if your students do not believe that they will succeed, if they have a 0 expectancy, their motivation is going to be 0. Anything times 0 is 0. If they have a low value for the task, if they don't really care about the task, they're also not likely to be motivated. But they are in your class. They're paying you money to be there in your group or your team, so it's likely that they do value it somewhat. It's the expectancy for success that, as the leader, you have control over. So, again, if either one equals 0, the whole equation will equal 0. So you want to keep that in mind when you are working with your team or group. I'm going to try my best here. I'm noticing the video is a little shaky. I've got the iPad propped up on a couple boxes so that the camera's pointed right at the laptop, so I'll try my best. So we're going to develop a motivational plan. So what that means is we're going to capitalize on the positive traits from our students. It's all about positive language usage. Focus on the things that your students do well. Point those out to them, praise them for it, be genuine in that praise, rather than focusing on mistakes or misbehavior. You want them to model this kind of behavior, other students to model good behavior, especially with kids. So pointing out good behavior, pointing out positive traits or positive behaviors is really a good way to go. And it is a very it enhances the motivation of your group. It's a good thing to be doing. You also need to be aware of what the needs, desires, and expectations of your group is or are. So you need to ask. It's a very simple thing, but leaders sometimes take for granted what their dancers need. So you need to ask them. Ask them questions, listen to their answers, and you need to learn to listen without judging. It's very easy as a leader to incorporate our own will, our own thoughts into the commentary. We want the group to go our own way, which as a leader you do need to have some control. You need to have control over the group's operations to even be a leader, but you also don't want to slip into a dictatorship. You want to be able to listen to your dancers and incorporate their input when you can. So if you treat them in a positive, encouraging manner, if you capitalize on what they do well, and you keep in mind what their needs and desires are at any given moment, you will see the best results. So we have some tools available to us. First of all, your words can reflect your attitude, and this can be very, very subtle. So the quote there, "You are doing great, but your lines aren't straight." You very easily could rephrase that into, "You are doing great, now let's work on our lines." This is straight out of your manual. That one word changes the whole connotation of the sentence, and it also changes the meaning to go from, becomes a kind of a backhanded negative criticism rather than a compliment. The first part is lost to that big all caps word "but." So being aware of the words you say, it's very easy to slip into this because we don't always monitor every word we say. As the leader, when you're teaching the class, you need to be more aware of it. Yes, we're human. We all make mistakes. We're not going to be able to monitor every single word we say. But on average, you should have an idea of what the words are. So you should always establish clear and consistent standards. This is true for any organization or group, but clogging is no different. You should have clear, concise, and known rules, and you need to stick to them. So if you have a rule for behavior, if you have a rule for attendance or lateness, especially with kids' classes, you shouldn't establish a rule only to not follow it. It makes you look wishy-washy. You lose credibility as a leader. It makes things confusing. People really don't know what to do or what's expected of them. So it's pretty clean cut that you should always have a set standard of rules that you should or at least can be able to follow. And I'm all about communication. Communication is key. I would also argue that you should include why those rules, especially if it's a highly rule-based group, with say a large group of children and things like that, be clear as to why these rules are in place. Is it for safety? Is it for most effective running of the group? Don't just say this is how it is without providing at least a little explanation as to why, not on a grand level, but it is useful to students' motivation and they'll respect you more for it. You should promote realistic expectations and make sure your goals are attainable. So especially for beginner classes, this is very important. Setting solid intermediate goals. Don't set lofty goals that are far out of students' reach, at least within 1 or 2 class periods. They're going to get discouraged, they're going to get frustrated. So setting attainable goals is one of those aspects. SMART goals. It's SMART. I can't remember the full acronym now. Time-bound, realistic. You can look it up online. But the idea here is having really attainable goals that facilitate their goodwill and their motivation. So accomplishment feedback. So basically, you are giving them feedback at each step of the way that they accomplish something, and you're bolstering their motivation each time you do so. So moving on. Dealing with failures and mistakes in positive ways. This is very true, and I'm going to read this to you. Mistakes are momentary experiences rather than situations which permanently define a dancer or leader. Avoid ignoring the mistake or projecting anger. Try and learn from the mistake and react in a positive and constructive way. So, largely when students of all ages make mistakes, they know they made mistakes, and they probably feel a little bad about it. So it doesn't help to kind of pile on and make the failure known, the mistake known, and getting people to feel even worse about it. Dealing with it in a positive way is the best way to handle the situation. and at least correcting if somebody's not picking up a step or so on and so forth, making them aware of, okay, well, let's work on this. Let's make this better. Here's what we want to be striving for. It's all about wordage, and I believe that if you just pay attention to that, it isn't too hard to be able to do it. I believe I have another academic topic here that we are implicit mindset theory from Dweck. So this is another educational psychology concept, and it basically argues that there are two ways that students can believe they learn, their beliefs about their learning. They can have an entity belief or an incremental belief. And an incremental belief is what I'll start with, which is the better of the two, is that personality characteristics or intelligence or clogging ability are changeable and malleable and can develop over time. So basically that first line from above, mistakes are momentary experiences rather than situations which permanently define a dancer or leader. If a student has an incremental mindset, they're likely to believe that mistake was a one-time occasion. They can get better, they can learn from it, they can bounce back. The entity belief, or the entity mindset, is a bit rougher, and that's the one where students, if they make a mistake, they believe that they're losers. They're never going to be any good. And we want to dispel this line of thinking at every turn. So in your classroom or group or team, you should be very aware of what you're projecting as far as mindsets and beliefs, and try to make it as much incremental as possible. Try to make it known that if you make a mistake, you can learn from it and bounce back very quickly, and nothing is as fixed and stable as people think they are. Reprimand effectively. So it is a sign of a weak leader when you are unable to let students know of their mistakes or to try to get them to change undesirable behavior. Again, this is geared more towards kids, but adults too. There can be adults that are disrespectful or rude to you for various reasons. Disruptive behavior in a class. I'd argue it's even harder to deal with adults because they're adults. Children are used to being led or directed by adults, but other adults taking a class from another adult, they may not be as receptive to being corrected, not just in making a mistake of footwork, but if they're behaving inappropriately. So you need to be prepared for that and reprimand effectively. That is directly, quickly, calmly. If there's an egregious behavior that is really disruptive or really rude or really problematic, I would recommend doing it after the fact, after the class is over. Take the person aside privately and address the matter with them there. You don't want to get into have a scene in the front of class and take away from class time. That is usually a more effective strategy. We also have build inner drive, so you should want to foster the motivation within your group. Give credit where credit is due. So if a group member works particularly hard or they attain a certain goal, give them credit for that. And if their motivation seems to be low as a whole, you might want to consider asking them, why is motivation very low? Why are we not seeking to achieve here? Is it just simply fatigue? Did everybody have a tired, busy week? Or is there something more important going on? You should know these things. And lastly, you should recognize achievements. Praise and celebrate and acknowledge the achievements of your dancers. So some groups have certificates at the end of beginner classes. Some groups have parties, celebrations. All of it sounds great, but basically you should recognize when your dancers have achieved a lofty goal. Say after a big show, if they do well, have a dinner party. None of that is a bad idea, and dancers appreciate it. It makes you look good as a leader, and it builds cohesiveness and team spirit. So I would argue and recommend that you recognize achievements at every step of the way. So you should monitor morale. So what is morale? This relates back to our objectives for the seminar. It's the state of the spirits of a person or group as exhibited by confidence, cheerfulness, discipline, and willingness to perform assigned tasks. So basically, the spirit of the group, or esprit de corps. I hope I said that right. Don't judge me. But the idea is you should create a sense of belongingness, a group cohesion. Like I said, with the parties and celebrations and things, helps with this immensely. But make the group such that people want to be a part of it. People cheer each other on. They root for each other. Reward cooperation among group members. Compliment your students. All this builds morale. Students should want to come to your class. They shouldn't feel like they have to come to your class, or they certainly shouldn't feel like they're dreading it. You need to be aware of this. But it's often little disputes, minor misunderstandings, or small inconsiderate acts that build into large fights. So this is where I go back to communication. Communication is key. The more you communicate, the better it is, especially when there are problems. I have a case study there. There's basically a group that I'm aware of that has a lot of infighting only because nobody talks to one another. And small little acts are misinterpreted and blown out of proportion. And there's a lot of quarrels because people don't speak up and talk to one another. So it may be uncomfortable, it may be unpleasant, but I think that the most important thing, the best thing you can do is to be communicative. And that will build morale and respect in your group as well. You should deal with complainers and troublemakers. Again, do not avoid them, but you might want to address it after the fact. Address it swiftly, like if there's a problem behavior in the night, during the evening or day, that day after class, address it. You shouldn't just ignore it. Your other dancers who are doing the right things will not respect you for that. They will be quite bothered by that. If there's a complainer or a troublemaker, then you're just leaving it alone. And it might encourage others to be like them. They'll model the behavior they see, and they'll know you won't do anything about it. So this is one of those situations where you really need to be proactive and address things as they come, even though it is very uncomfortable. And then finally, you're a person too. Maintain your own morale. Keep up your own spirits. Again, people will model what they see. If you're not excited to be there, they won't be excited to be there. So keep that in mind. I have a list of personality traits here. Ooh, sorry. Personality traits: caring, gracious, responsible, cautious, discreet, ethical, direct, and dedicated. And I'm kind of hinting at that throughout this presentation, so I won't elaborate too much on it. But this is what your manual says. These are 8 personality traits of good leaders, and so you should emulate them at every turn. And most people that teach groups tend to develop these skills through sheer practice and experience, so I would keep these in mind. So there are a few actions that leaders can take that are a sign of success, that are a sign of this successful leader. First of all, request instead of order. As my grandmother would say, I can be led but not be driven. People really respond well to requests, asking them to do things. If they're directed or they're ordered, they are probably not going to appreciate that very much. Requesting them makes the student feel more valued, as the screen says. And again, these people are paying you to come to the class, in most cases, unless it's a volunteer group. But no one has to be there. No one is forced to be there. They're not being drafted to be there. So you should be aware that you are requesting these things of them. Without them, you have no team or group. You should accept some discomfort. Again, either dealing with troublemakers and so on and so forth, or just trying new things. We are, as humans, we really don't like trying new things. So you need to be aware of that and accept discomfort at certain points. If you always try to avoid discomfort, if you're running from discomfort, you're going to be running through your entire tenure as a leader, and you won't be a very successful one. You should establish goals, but don't expect to reach them all. So define a goal, plan the steps necessary to reach the goals, evaluate the steps you've met, and set a timeline for completion. Remember to be flexible with your plan, as life always happens. Again, an action that a successful leader takes. Having a game plan, knowing what you want to accomplish and when and how. Dancers will respect this, and it will make your life a lot easier. The last little foray into educational psychology concepts that I'm going to talk about in this presentation is achievement goal theory. So these are 4 goal orientations that students can possess that I wanted you guys to be aware of. Mastery approach is students who seek to learn as much as they can. Mastery avoidance, which is a bit rarer than the other 4, it's a bit more rare, is seeking to avoid a decline in skill or loss of learning. You should be aware that seniors or elderly folks are more likely to feel this way. They're motivated to avoid losing what they currently have as far as a skill set. So they're concerned about their own mastery. They're not really concerned about other people, as the last two will be, but they are not really worried about learning as much as they can. They just don't want to lose what they have. And then the last two are with regard to other people. Performance approach, seeking to outperform everyone else, trying to be the best, and performance avoidance, seeking to avoid underperforming everyone else. And that's seen as pretty bad, pretty deleterious form of motivation that leads to a whole host of negative outcomes. So this research, that these 4 achievement goal orientations, students can have a mix of styles. They can be adopting more than one at any one point. This is not likely stuff that you guys have seen before, so I wanted to make you aware of it. If you see a student who is really seeking, trying to learn as much as they can, foster that attitude. That's a good way for them to be. If you see students who are more concerned about being better than everybody else or not being the worst, you should have a conversation with them. You should try to have a little mini intervention and try to get them a little bit more focused on their own learning and don't worry about other people. Again, celebrate success. I talked about that before. That's an important morale booster. Just say no. This is my biggest thing. I tend to say yes to everybody, and that's not a good thing. You will have to say no at some point, so you're going to have to practice at some point. You're going to have to learn how to do it. You can't do everything, so don't hold yourself to that kind of standard. And again, listen for the unspoken. Active listening. So people may not vocalize everything to you. You need to be aware of what's being said or what's being not said, non-verbal, if it's body language. You should be aware of all of these things within your group. It takes some skill, but the half the battle is being aware that it exists, that people can communicate without speaking. So you should be aware of that. Disagree without being disagreeable. So you can have your own opinion. If somebody has an idea that you don't care for, as a leader, it's your job to reconcile all of this. But you shouldn't be argumentative or constantly battling. There are better ways. So be strategic in how you handle disagreements among group members or between you and group members, and never attack the person. Always talk about the issue. Diplomacy. Communication is key, as I've said. Successful negotiation hinges on a willingness to accept compromise and hear all sides. So if you, I know we're all people, we're humans, but if you as a leader become one-sided and stop listening to people and stop caring about the other side's perspective, you become a dictator, and people don't like that very much. That is not successful leadership. So you should be aware of that. Strive to do the best you can in all situations, and that reputation will follow you. Not only your reputation, but your dancer's reputation. They will model what they see and be the best they possibly can be. I believe this is the last point. Accept that you are not perfect. Be aware of your humanity and imperfections. That's what makes us human. So that was Leadership and Motivation through this CCI online video series. I hope you enjoyed yourselves and learned a few things. Again, this is Andrew Perry, CCI, and we'll see you real soon.